The first thing he noticed was how still they stood. 3 of them at the edge of the lantern light, large-framed and cold, the kind of still that comes from being very careful for a very long time. The one in front looked at him the way someone looks when they have already been told no. Then she said it. "Please, just for tonight." He stood in the doorway for a long moment. What happened next would change what the homestead was, and what he was, more than he understood then. The farm had come to him the way most things came to him in those years, without ceremony, without anyone asking if he was ready. He had bought it the spring after, when staying in the old house had stopped being something he could manage. There was work here. That was enough. The place was not much. A fence line running east along the ridge, 3 posts leaning so far they were only still standing out of habit. A barn at the far end of the yard, smelling of old hay and the animals that had stopped using it before he arrived. Fields that were flat and grudging, and would need 2 seasons before they gave him anything worth having. He knew this going in. He had done harder things. He rose before the sun each morning and worked until his hands knew what to do without being told. He fixed the fence posts. He cleared the drainage along the east field. He patched the barn roof with cedar shingles, board by board, until it held. He did not think about why he was doing it. He just did it. There was one thing he had not fixed. It sat on the shelf above the hearth, where she had put it the first winter of their marriage. A small flat stone with a white ring around its middle, the kind, she said, brought luck to a house. He had moved it once, in the 2nd week after. He had put it in the drawer beneath the stairs. 3 days later, he had taken it back out and set it on the shelf again, and it would stay there. He did not think about this either. The cold came back in the 2nd week of that autumn, earlier than it had any right to. Not the kind of cold that makes you put on a coat, the kind that finds the gaps in a house and settles into the walls. He had the fire going by dark. He ate alone at the table, the chairs stacked along the far wall, because there was no reason to have them all out, and he read for a while by the fire, and then he put the book down and sat. For a long time, the only sound was the fire. He was not waiting for anything. He had stopped waiting for things. That was something he had learned in the year since she died. Not a lesson he had chosen. Just one that arrived the way grief arrives, without asking, without checking whether you were ready for it. You stop waiting. You work. You sit. The night does what nights do. Then there was a sound at the porch. Not loud. Not urgent. Something that could have been the wind settling against the boards, or a branch, or nothing at all. He sat still for a moment. Then he got up and he moved to the door. He opened the door with one hand and held the lantern higher without thinking about it. There were 3 of them on the porch, large, the way he had heard they were, the kind of large that changes how you read a doorway. The one in front came up, past his eye level by most of a head. The 2 behind her were near the same. They were cold in the way a person gets cold when they have been in it for a long time, without anywhere to go, past the shivering that looks dramatic, and into the quieter kind that just sits in the hands and the jaw. None of them moved toward him. The one in front looked at him. Not a challenge. Not a plea. Not yet. Just a long, level look, the kind that has something waiting behind it. He held the lantern and looked back. She was young. He could not have said exactly why he was certain of that. Something in the way she held herself, still and careful, trying not to show it. The 2 behind her were close to her age, or close enough. Sisters, he thought, though he could not have said why that word came to him. It just did. None of them spoke. Then the one in front took a short breath and said it. Please, just for tonight." Her voice was low, level, not a demand, not quite a question either. The kind of voice that has already heard no, and is asking anyway, because there is nothing left to do but ask. The two behind her did not move. They did not look at him the way she looked at him. They looked at the ground near his feet or at the dark to his left, waiting. He stood in the doorway. He did not reach for anything. He did not step back. He looked past her at the yard, at the fence line running dark against the sky, at the road he could not quite see from here. No horses, no one else. Just the cold and the three of them and the sound of the fire behind him. He looked at her again. Not trust, not anything he could have named. Something closer to the recognition that the night was what it was, and the cold was what it was, and there was a door, and someone was standing outside it. He stepped back from the threshold. He did not say, "Come in." He stepped back and turned and walked to the far side of the room, and that was all. They came in. The cold came with them, a rush of it through the open door, and the fire pulled sideways and then righted itself. He heard the door close. He heard three people settling their weight in a space they didn't know. He did not turn around immediately. The room felt different with them in it. Not smaller exactly, but changed the way a room changes when it has held one person for a long time, and then there are suddenly four. When he turned, all three of them were standing just inside the door. Still, not touching anything. The young orc in front had her eyes on him. The two behind her were taking the room in, the walls, the table, the floor. Neither of them looked at the shelf above the hearth. He did. The stone sat where it always sat. "One night," he said. She nodded once. That was all. He took the lantern to the barn and held it up in the doorway so they could see the space. Old hay, but dry. A stall in the far corner with room enough for three. He could hear them breathing behind him. He hung the lantern on the peg inside the door. "It's warmer than it looks," he said. He was not sure that was true. He left them there and went back to the house and pulled the door shut behind him. He did not stand at the door listening. He did not go to the window. He sat down in the chair by the fire and put another piece of wood on and let it burn. The stone was on the shelf. He looked at it for a moment, and then he looked at the fire instead. The barn was there, and they were in it, and he had said one night, and that was what it was. He stayed until the fire burned low. Then he went to bed. He slept, which surprised him. He was up before the sun. He moved through the dark house the way he always moved through it, without a light, until he reached the kitchen, and he put the stove going and set water to heat and stood at the window while it came up. He looked at the barn. The door was shut. No sound from it. He cut 2 thick pieces of bread from the loaf and wrapped them in cloth and went out into the cold and set them on the step in front of the barn door. He did not knock. He set them down without a sound and was already at the fence line on the east side of the field when the barn door opened. He did not turn around. From the corner of his eye he saw one of them step out onto the frost. Not the one who had spoken last night. This one moved more carefully, like she was not sure of the ground. She stopped when she saw the bread. She looked toward the fence, toward him, for a long moment. Then she picked up the cloth bundle and went back inside. The door closed. He kept working. An hour passed, maybe more. The light came up slow and flat the way it does in cold weather, giving nothing away. He was pulling a fence post that had heaved over the winter when he heard the barn door open again and looked up. The young orc stood in the doorway. She was watching him. Not moving, not speaking, just standing there with her arms loose at her sides, and her eyes tracking what he was doing at the fence post with the same level attention she had turned on him the night before. It was not a threatening kind of watching, not curious exactly either. More like the way you watch something when you are trying to understand whether it is what it appears to be. He had known that kind of watching before. His wife had done it in the first years, when she was still learning him. He did not think about that now. He did not stop working. He did not look away from the post, and he did not acknowledge her with a nod or a word. After a while, he heard the barn door close. He straightened up and looked. The doorway was empty. He went back to the post. The second morning, they did not wait to be asked. He was at the east fence when he heard the sound of the axe. He turned and looked. 2 of them were at the woodpile, one splitting and one stacking, moving in a rhythm that suggested they had done it before. The third was clearing the blocked drainage ditch along the south wall of the barn, the one he had been meaning to get to for a week. She was using a length of board he had not told her was there. The stack of wood beside the wall was already half again what it had been at the start of the morning. He watched for a moment. Then he went back to the fence. Neither side said anything about it. On the third day they came to the fence. He was working the east section from the left end, setting posts and driving them. He did not look up when they started from the right. He heard them, the thud of the driver, the creak of wire being pulled taut, the low sound one of them made when a post refused to seat straight. The sound was not frustration exactly, more like information. They worked toward each other. They met somewhere near the middle of the section. He became aware of the young orc beside him before he looked up. She looked at the work he had done, then at the work she had done. Then she moved on to the next task, and he moved on to his. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. The cold came back the third night, harder than it had been before. He felt it in the house and thought about the barn. He did not have to think about it for long. He took a blanket from the chest at the foot of the bed, the heavy one, wool and still good, and carried it out across the dark yard. He stopped at the barn door. He could hear nothing from inside. He set the blanket on the step, folded, and walked back to the house, without knocking and without a sound. In the morning, it was gone from the step. He did not comment on this. Neither did anyone else. 3 days had passed since the night on the porch. He had not told them to go. She had not asked if they could stay. Neither of them had looked at the arrangement they had made, the one-night arrangement, and said anything about what it had become or was becoming. The cold was still there. The work was still there. He rose before the sun, and they were up before he finished his coffee, and that was the shape of it, unspoken and ongoing, a thing that persisted, because neither side ended it. He was not sure what that made it. Not shelter. Not yet. Not something that had a word yet. The one night had become 3, and the 3 had not become anything else. Not officially. And he supposed that was maybe the right way for it to go. Quietly. Without anyone having to say so out loud. There was a corner post that needed replacing on the west end of the fence line, the kind of post that takes 2 people to set. He had been leaving it because he knew this, and did not have another person. In the morning of the 4th day, he went out to it with the post and the driver, and crouched in the hole he had dug, and tried to hold the post upright, and drive it at the same time, which did not work. He tried this 3 times. The post went in crooked each time, and he pulled it back out. The young orc came around the corner of the barn and stopped. He looked at her. She looked at the post. She came over without being asked, and took hold of the top of it with both hands, and held it straight and level, and did not move. He drove the post in 8 strokes. It went in true. He straightened up and she let go, and stepped back. Neither of them said thank you. It did not seem like the right word for what had just happened. He started tamping the base, and after a moment, she picked up the second post and carried it to the next hole. "How far north were you traveling?" he said, not looking up from the work. She thought about this for a moment. 2 days more, she said. He nodded. He did not ask what was 2 days north. She did not explain. He tamped the base, and she held the next post, and they did not speak again until the section was finished. On the 4th day, he made enough soup for 4. He had not decided to do this exactly. He had just made soup the way he made it, which was in the large pot, and he had stood at the stove looking at the large pot and gotten 4 bowls down from the shelf instead of 1. He set the bowls on the table and went to sit on the floor by the fire, leaving the chairs. The barn door opened. He heard their feet on the porch steps. One of them came through first, the smallest, and sat down in the nearest chair without looking at it or thinking about it. The second followed and sat. The young orc was last. She looked at the chairs, then at him on the floor, then she pulled out the far chair and sat. They ate. No one spoke. The fire made its sounds, and the wind moved against the outside of the house, and the soup was gone faster than he expected. He got up to put another piece of wood on the fire. On his way back, he passed the shelf above the hearth. He glanced at the stone the way he always did, and then he looked at the table. One of the others was looking at the shelf. Not at him. Not at the room. At the shelf. At the stone sitting there. With the kind of close attention you give a thing when you are trying to understand what it is doing in that particular spot. He sat back down on the floor without saying anything. Later, when the others had gone back out, he got up and moved the stone a few inches to the left. Not to hide it, just to touch it for a moment. Then he left it where it was. The east field had been planted wrong. He had known it was struggling, but had not known why. And then one morning he looked up from the fence work and saw the young orc standing at the edge of the field with her hands at her sides, looking at the ground. She was not doing anything. She was just looking. He went back to the fence. 20 minutes later he heard the spade. She worked her way across the near quarter of the field, turning small sections, reading what came up. He watched from the fence line. She was looking at roots and the color of the soil beneath, testing the give of it with 2 fingers the way you test bread, moving on when she had what she needed. She found the problem near the south edge, where the ground dipped and had been holding water all season. She cut a shallow channel from the low point toward the ditch at the field's edge, and then she stood and looked at it for a moment, and then she put the spade back. He crossed the field when she was done. "You've worked land before," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," she said. He did not ask, "Whose?" She did not tell him. He crouched and looked at the channel she had cut and how it ran. It would work. He stood up and went back to the fence. He did not see the wrapped thing until the afternoon. He was coming around the corner of the barn, and one of the others was sitting against the wall in the low sun, and she had not heard him coming. She had something in her hands, small enough to cup in both palms, wrapped in a piece of cloth that had been brown once. She was looking at it, the way you look at a thing when you have looked at it so many times it has become something else, something you carry that is not quite an object anymore. He stopped. He stepped back around the corner of the barn before she looked up. He heard the cloth folding, the small dry sound of it being tucked away. The young orc was 20 feet off by the water trough. She had seen him see it. She looked at him for a moment, and then looked at the water in the trough and did not say anything about it. and he understood that he was not supposed to. He went back to what he had been doing. That evening, the three of them were in and out of the house with the easy movement of people who have gotten used to a space. He was washing the bowls from supper when the young orc came in from outside and stopped near the door. "The last place," she said, "told us before dark." He set the bowl down. He knew what that meant. Told before dark meant before sundown, which was another way of saying, not our problem after that. He did not say this. He finished washing the bowl and set it on the shelf, and that was the end of it. He looked around the kitchen. The spade was by the door, cleaned. The fire was going. The chairs were all pulled out from the table now, all three of them, because there was no reason to keep them stacked against the wall anymore. Something had changed, or was changing, and he had not decided anything about it. He had just not stopped it. The fire had been going for hours, and the room was warm in the specific way a room gets warm when the day's cold has finally gone out of it. One of the sisters had fallen asleep near the hearth. Her breathing was slow and even. The other had gone back to the barn earlier, or maybe somewhere else in the house, and he had not heard her leave. That happened sometimes now. The young orc was still up. So was he. Neither of them had planned this. It had just happened that the evening ran long, and no one had moved to end it. And now it was late, and the fire was low, and they were both sitting near it. She looked at the shelf. "What is that?" she said. He didn't look up from the fire right away. He knew what she was looking at. "My wife's," he said. "She found it in the south field the first spring we were here. She kept things she found, small ones, mostly stones." He looked at it then. "When she died, I left it where she had it." The young orc said nothing for a moment. Then she nodded, the slow kind of nod that is not agreement so much as acknowledgement. "We had a place," she said. The fire shifted, and she watched it. Before this. Not like this smaller. There were more of us then. A camp, but it had been there long enough that someone had put in a fence and someone else had started a garden. We thought we would stay a while. She stopped. There were 8 of us in the spring. By the end of the autumn there were 3. He did not ask how. She did not say. "The others," she said, "not dead, just gone somewhere else, the kind of gone that has its own weight." He understood what she meant. People left, and you continued, and the space where they had been did not close over. It stayed the shape it was. They sat with this for a while. He had his grief, and she had hers, and they were not the same grief. He had a name and a face for his, and a specific morning in a specific winter. She had a weight made of people still living, which is its own kind of loss, different from the other kind, not lighter. The shape of what a person carries is not the same between one person and another, but they were both sitting in the late part of the evening with a fire going, and without the people who had once made evenings into something else. That was what they had in common. It was enough to sit beside. The fire needed wood. He got up and put a piece on, and on his way back he passed the shelf. He looked at the stone. It sat where it had been sitting all evening, where it had been sitting for years before tonight. He did not move it. He went and sat back down. One of the sisters near the hearth made a sound and opened her eyes halfway. "There was a crow this morning," she said. Her voice was thick with sleep. A very large one. She appeared to think about this for a moment. "Did you see it?" Neither of them had. Her eyes closed and her breathing went even. She was back asleep before anyone could have answered. The young orc looked at the fire for a moment and then looked at the floor. "Good night," she said, and got up. He said it back. After she went out, he stayed where he was for a while. The fire settled into itself. The stone was still on the shelf. He had not moved it, and he sat there long enough to notice that he hadn't, and to understand that this was not something he had decided. It was just where it stayed now. 3 weeks passed. The fence line was repaired end to end, which had not been the case. The barn roof had a new section on the east corner, where it had been failing since last autumn. There was a kitchen garden along the south wall of the house that had not been there in the spring. Not large, just a turned section, with stakes and string and something green coming up in rows. He had not planted it. He had not been asked if it could be planted. It had simply appeared. Mornings were different. Not louder. The 3 of them didn't fill a room with noise. But there was more presence in it. A fire already going when he came down, the sound of movement from the barn before he had his coffee, boots on the porch steps. The young orc had taken the heaviest work, the lifting, the hauling, the tasks that needed 2 people that he had been doing alone or leaving unfinished. One of the others had settled into something more careful. Fence posts still in the ground, but needing resetting. Detail repairs that required patience. The third had become the one who knew where things were. When he needed the draw knife or the second coil of wire, she appeared from somewhere and pointed without being asked. None of this had been assigned. It had arrived through repetition, the way all habits arrive. He was on the road the 2nd week of the month, coming back from the mill with flour and wire and a few other things, and he came around the bend where the homestead first came into view from the road, and he stopped the cart without meaning to. He had looked at this homestead from this spot more times than he could count. He knew what it looked like. It looked different now. More figures. More activity. The woodpile stacked high and even against the north wall, a line of cloth drying near the barn, the east fence straight where it had been sagging for 2 seasons. From the road, to someone who did not know what it had been 6 weeks ago, it would look like a working farm with a full household. He sat on the cart and looked at it for a moment. Then he drove on. He was sharpening a blade on the whetstone a few days later, when the young orc came around the side of the house with a coil of fence wire and set it down near the barn door. The coil slipped on the way down and started to roll. He stopped it with his foot before it could go far. She looked at where it had stopped. "Thank you," she said. It was the first time she had said it. Not that she had not meant it before in other moments. Just the first time the word had come out as a word. He handed the coil back to her. "Left side," he said. "More grip on the left." She adjusted. The coil held. She carried it around the corner, and he heard the sound of wire being worked. They did not speak again that afternoon. It was not an unfriendly silence. It was the kind of silence that did not need to be anything other than what it was. He went back to the whetstone. He did not notice the stone was gone from the shelf until that evening when he came in and passed the hearth. He looked at the empty space, and then looked around the kitchen. He found it on the windowsill above the basin, the one that caught the afternoon light. He stood in the doorway and looked at it there. A different spot, a different light. He did not know who had moved it. He left it where it was. He heard the horse before he saw it. He was working the south edge of the east field when the sound came from the road. One horse, steady pace, not in a hurry. He straightened up and looked. A rider was coming from the direction of town, the kind of pace that says, "This is business and not trouble," the kind that has done this before and knows the difference matters. He set the spade down and walked to the gate. The rider stopped at the gate without coming through it. One man. He was dressed plainly, but held himself the way of someone who carries official weight. Something about how he sat the horse without fidgeting, how he kept his hands still. He was not young. He was not unkind. "I have a message," the man said, "from some people in town. Or not a message exactly, a concern that's been registered." He glanced toward the barn and then back. "Word has reached town that you have orc women living on the property. 3 of them." The widower looked at him and said nothing. "There's a man," the official went on. "His name is Harlan Vetch. He's filed a formal complaint. Says it's a matter of community concern. He has some backing." He shifted in the saddle, not with discomfort, so much as with the weight of what he was carrying. "I'm not here to act on anything. I'm here to let you know this has been registered, so it's not a surprise when he follows up. He intends to follow up." "What's the timeline?" the widower said. "He hasn't set one, but he's not a patient man, and he has backing, as I said." The official looked at him steadily. "I'm sorry for the trouble. I'm just doing my job." "I understand," the widower said. "Thank you for coming yourself." The official gave him a short nod and turned the horse and went back the way he had come, at the same steady pace. The widower turned around. The 3 sisters were standing in the barn doorway, all 3, side by side. He did not know how long they had been there or how much they had heard. The official had looked at them once during the conversation. One look, not long, not hostile, just a man noting what was in front of him. The sisters had not come forward. They had not stepped back into the barn either. They had stood in the doorway the way you stand in a place that is yours enough to stand in. He walked toward the house. The young orc left the others and came to meet him before he reached the door. "What did he want?" she said. He stopped and looked at her. "Someone from town objects to you being here. His name is Harlan Vetch. He has filed something formal, and he has people behind him." He looked at her steadily. "Someone is coming. I don't know when." She stood with this for a moment. "Do you want us to go?" she said. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the ground, then at the fence line, then at the house. He was thinking about it as honestly as he could, and what he came to was the same thing he had come to the night on the porch. "No," he said. She looked at him for a moment, the way she had looked at him that first night, the long, level look that has something waiting behind it. Then she nodded once and went back to where the others were standing. He stayed in the yard after she left. The road was empty. The gate was still closed. The cold was coming in from the north the way it had been doing all week, and the fence posts he hadn't finished yet were still standing crooked along the far line. He went inside and put the kettle on. They came back 3 days later, and this time there were 4 of them. He saw the riders from the field while he was still a distance from the gate, 4 horses on the road, coming from town at a pace that meant business. He put down what he was carrying and walked to meet them, not hurrying, not slow. Harlan Vetch was the one at the front. The widower had not known him well before, last week, and knew him better now. He was the one the others looked toward when they stopped at the gate, the one who held himself at the center of the group without needing to be told to. A broad man, not especially tall, with the look of someone who had pressed a point before and had usually come out ahead of it. He had 3 men with him. 2 the widower didn't know by name, and the 3rd was the same official from before, sitting his horse with the expression of a man who would rather be somewhere else. Vetch did not bother with an opening. "You've had notice," he said. "That's been given and received. Now we're here to make clear that what you're running on this property is a matter of community concern, and that there are people in this town who expect you to act accordingly." The widower stood at the gate. "This is my land," he said. "It is," Vetch said. "And what a man does on his land reflects on the people around him. You have orc women, 3 of them, living here and working this property. And people are talking. He looked past the widower toward the barn. I'm asking you to end the arrangement. The widower said nothing. Movement came from his left and right. Quiet, unhurried, not called for. The young orc came around the side of the barn and moved to stand at the gate beside him, to his right. One of the other sisters came from the far side and stepped into place on his left. The third came last and settled in slightly behind, filling the space between the first 2. None of them spoke. They just stood. Vetch watched each one take position. His expression did not change, but his eyes moved. They went to the young orc, who stood nearly level with the widower in height and wider at the shoulder. They went to the sister on the left. They moved back to the widower, and then across the whole group slowly, the way a man counts something he had not expected to count. I've stated my position, Vetch said. His voice was still certain, but there was something different in it now. A slight settling, the way a voice settles when the room has not answered the way the speaker planned. The widower looked at him. I heard your position, he said. This is my land. They are here because I said they could be here. That is my right. I don't have anything else to say about it. Vetch's gaze moved again across the group. The widower could see the math happening behind his face, the private calculation of a man who had ridden out expecting one thing and arrived at something different. He looked at the sisters. He looked at his own 3 men. He looked back at the widower. We'll be back, he said. You ought to think hard about this in the meantime. He turned his horse. The others followed. The official was last to go. He gave the widower one brief look as he turned. Not hostile, not sympathetic, just the look of someone who has seen how these things tend to go. The 4 of them rode back down the road toward town. The widower stood at the gate with the sisters behind and beside him. He watched until they rounded the bend and were gone. The gate was still closed. He had not opened it once. Vetch came back the next morning with 6 men. 6 was more than the widower had expected, and less than would have made a difference. He saw them from the house while he was still pulling his coat on, and he went to the gate at the same pace he had gone every other time. Not fast, not slow, the pace of a man who has already decided. The young orc moved to stand beside him before he reached the gate, coming from the direction of the barn. She took the right side without being asked. One of the sisters came around the far corner of the barn and settled into the left. The third came last, stepping into the space behind and between the first 2. They moved into position the way you move into position when you have already figured out where you stand, quiet and without looking at each other. Vetch sat his horse at the road and watched them assemble. He did not speak while it happened. His men held their horses, still on either side of him. When the 4 of them were at the gate and not moving, Vetch looked at the group for a long moment. I gave you time to think, he said. His voice was even and certain. He had 6 men behind him, and he was used to that voice working. I'm asking you once more to end this arrangement. Send them on their way. There's still a version of this where it doesn't go further. The widower looked at him. You know where the road is, he said. Vetch's jaw set. You don't understand what you're inviting, he said. You think this is the end of it. It isn't the end of it. This goes harder, and it goes further, and when it does, you're going to be standing here by yourself. The widower didn't move. The sisters didn't move. The horses on Vetch's side shifted and fidgeted the way horses do when they are reading the air for what the people on their backs cannot see. But on the widower's side of the gate, not one person moved at all. The silence came in, and settled. It went on long enough to have weight, the kind of silence that is not the absence of sound, but a thing that occupies a space. Vetch was waiting for someone to flinch. Nobody did. "You won't be by yourself," the widower said. His voice was the same tone it always was, flat, plain, the tone of a man who is stating a fact and not offering an argument. "That's all I have to say to you." Something moved across Vetch's face. Not fear exactly. It was not quite that, and naming it that would have given it too clean a shape. It was something closer to the recognition that he had ridden out toward a certain kind of ground and arrived at a different kind entirely. He had expected one tired man who did not want trouble and could be moved by the weight of numbers. He had found 4 people standing at a gate like it was made of them, and he needed to go home and think about what to do next. He looked at the young orc on the widower's right, then at the sister on the left, then at his own 6 men. "We'll be back," he said. It came out quieter than the first time he had said it. He pulled his reins. His men turned their horses. They rode back down the road the way they had come, and they did not hurry, because hurrying was the only thing that would have been worse. The widower stood at the gate. The sisters stood with him. None of them spoke right away. After a moment, one of them said, "The south row needs turning today." Nobody answered her, but the thing that had been coiled in the air around all of them let go, slowly, the way cold eases when you step inside, and then it was just a morning again, cold, ordinary, with work still in it. They went back to what they had been doing. The season turned. The fences were repaired end to end, and the fields had been turned twice and planted once, and the first yield had come up better than any single year the widower had managed on his own. The east corner of the barn roof no longer leaked. The kitchen garden along the south wall had made it through the cold and come back. The woodpile against the north wall was stacked high and stayed that way. The homestead looked, from the road or from anywhere, like a place that was being taken care of by more than one pair of hands. It showed in everything and in nothing you could point to specifically. He thought sometimes about what to call what they were. Not family, though the word moved in that direction when he wasn't paying attention, and he had stopped fighting it as much as he used to. Not guests, not workers, not lodgers, not any of the words that implied a temporary arrangement or a transaction. Not what they had been the first night, which was 3 cold strangers on a porch asking for one night. Not nothing. Something the language he had grown up with didn't have a word for yet. Something that the world he lived in hadn't needed to name until now. He had stopped looking for the word. The thing itself was there, and it was real. And that was more than enough. The stone from his wife's shelf was on the kitchen table now. It had moved there sometime in the autumn, and he had not moved it back. He had come down one morning and found it sitting at the center of the table, and he had put the bowls to one side to make room for it, and then gone about his morning. The light came to it differently there than it had on the shelf. He thought she would have liked where it had ended up. He thought she probably would have moved it there herself, eventually, if she had had more time. He came into the barn one afternoon in the early cold, and one of the sisters was sitting on a low stool near the door with the wrapped cloth in her hands. The one she had been carrying since before any of this. The one she had hidden from him that day against the outside wall of the barn. She did not hide it now. She had it open and was showing what was inside to the young orc, who crouched beside her and looked at the thing for a long moment, and then said something quiet. He did not hear what was said. He set down what he had come for and left them to it. Vetch had not come back. That did not mean he wouldn't. In the evenings, sometimes the young orc stood at the south fence and looked toward town, toward the road, toward the direction that trouble had come from and could come from again. He did not ask what she was watching for. He understood that the world out past the fence had not finished moving, and that she had understood this longer than he had. Some nights she looked south for a long time before she came in, but tonight the fire was going. The supper was done. 3 pairs of boots were beside the door next to his, lined up in the way that things line up when they belong somewhere. The world beyond the fence had not finished moving, but tonight it was quiet. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe to the channel to watch more stories like this one. Leave a like. It helps the channel a lot. And drop a comment down below. I always read them and use your feedback to make our content better. Thanks so much.